Welcome back, Cal listeners. This is Methodical Millions, where you can better your future and better yourself. Cal, we've got another awesome guest with us today. So everyone listening, please welcome Joe Pohlen, all the way from Grand Rapids, Michigan. How are you today, Joe?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. Thanks so much for joining us. So I want to ask a question. What gets you excited about life?
We're talking right after the start of a new year, and it kind of caught me in a reflective type moment, and just kind of thinking back about just working with people and kind of all that we've been through in the last few years at Cardinal and other projects I've worked on, and just feeling really grateful and just excited about the new year and all the different team members I get to work with, both in personal projects and at work, and just feeling really grateful right now.
Right on. And can you explain Cardinal to our listeners?
Yeah, so I run a company called Cardinal Senior Management. We're about 800 employees now. We own and operate assisted living buildings in the United States. We operate in the state of Michigan and the state of Pennsylvania. Our average resident is a 85-year-old widow, and we take care of all the things that she would need to live her best life. And I got into that business in 2015, and it's been a really fulfilling line of work.
That's awesome. I always get inspired when I see, people devoting their lives to others because I think, not that everyone's selfish, but it's not quite a common path. So, how did you fall in love with that growing up? What made you decide that what you were going to do?
I got started in real estate in college by buying homes and renting out the bedrooms to fellow classmates. When I graduated from college, it was 2010. The labor market was a little tough. We're still in our region going through the recession. What I got a job in after college was a court appointed receiver. So I would help the banks take back assets from borrowers. Through that, I learned how to buy businesses and real estate through a process called receivership. And I was able to meet up with some individuals who fortunately had some money. And we did a deal where I would do all the work, they would put up all the money, and we'd split everything 50-50. And I was able to get myself into the ownership side of a bunch of apartment buildings, self storage. I was able to get myself into some industrial buildings and kind of grow my real estate that way. And in 2014, had kind of a moment of crisis where I was running a self storage community and was doing relatively well financially, and just said, is this really what I want to spend the rest of my life doing? I knew a couple people in the assisted living business. They weren't close acquaintances. I knew them from a distance, and I said, you know what, I really want to learn this line of work. That's really what I feel called to do. And just went on a journey of emailing everyone in my LinkedIn and anyone I had contacts with, just asking, do you know anything about senior housing? Do you know anything about assisted living? Who can teach me? And one person referred me to another person who referred me to another person, and eventually I met my current business partner, Chuck. Chuck had some experience in assisted living, was looking to form a new group. I had some money at the time, and Chuck was kind of had the experience. I had a few bucks, so we kind of teamed up and started Cardinal Senior Management in 2015, and I've been running it ever since.
Right on. And so, just a question when it comes to these deals you're doing, I think it's very clever, by the way, because I think one of the most common threads people say to themselves is, I don't have enough money. And they always use the money factor as like the biggest reason why they won't even try things. But no, good for you. Um, so you're saying 50% of like an apartment building, those are usually, I think, high ticket item assets. So are you getting 50% of like a how big of a building are we talking about? And are you still owning those today? That's awesome.
Yep. So I still own a lot of them today. We did sell quite a few of them off. And the deal structure I did, I when I first got started, I didn't know anything about pref returns, waterfalls, promotes. I didn't know any of that. And I was fortunate enough to, kind of luck into a relationship and a deal that where I learned part of that. But I had a 24 unit, 110 bed apartment building in Michigan, and college kids rent on the per bed basis, and the units were rented significantly below market, and I knew this, and I knew that the current rent roll of 18,000 a month is actually a rent roll of 24,000 a month if you could just get the market rents for that building. So I went to a guy and I said, "Look, to buy this building is X number of dollars. I need 400 grand as the down payment. I don't have 400 grand. Would you want to put up 400 grand?" And he said, "Well, I don't have 400 grand, but between me and a guy I know, we could each put up 200 grand. And, what we want in return for our 400 grand is half ownership of the building and all the voting rights on liquidation and kind of sale, and a 7% return. And then anything after that we can split." And I didn't even know about charging a property management fee. I didn't know about any of that. And I just said, "Sure, great." And shook his hand. And that deal structure was kind of the deal structure we used on everything, where I would go in and stabilize the asset, not take a management fee. I was making less than $300 a month when I first started our business, and would just run in, operate the building. The money would come in from the tenants. The first bit of money would pay all the expenses like the property taxes, insurance. The next bit would pay the bank, and then the next bit would pay a 7% interest only payment on the money that the investors put in. And everything after that, we just split 50-50. And those assets went up significantly in value. And, that's kind of how I got my career started.
That's an awesome story. I think even just, a 7% return for a lot of people is pretty big, right? I'm guessing that's annual, right?
Yep, 7% annual. It was paid monthly. And the thought process the two wealthy individuals had was, I'd feel comfortable if I was getting 7% in the market. If this Joe kid can do what even half of what he thinks he can do, it would be significantly higher than that. He's not taking a property management fee, so it's actually kind of safer investment than us investing somewhere else, because he's super bought in and really wants to turn this around, and he doesn't make any money until we get our 7% return. And we'll bet on him, and if it goes bad, we'll lose the cash, and it'll sting him. But if it goes well and he can execute on his business plan, maybe this is going to be a good deal for us long term.
Yeah. And do you find that, in your sphere of influence, is it always almost always a partnership that helps? And, for people who wanna get started, should they take a similar path, or do you need, like, a unique set of qualifications?
I believe your success that you're going to have in life ultimately comes down to who do you trust and who trusts you. And I don't see how someone can accomplish kind of their professional goals without partnerships, without people believing in them, without people taking a risk on them and trusting them. And I was fortunate enough to build that trust and have someone take a chance on me. And I worked my tail off to continue to earn that trust. And that's a partner I still work with today. That partner has referred me to plenty of other individuals. And the trust of that individual and all the investors that invest in our deals is, it's the lifeblood of my career.
So I would think, obviously, moving on, how when you move to your current field, with starting Cardinal with your partner, so how did that look like? Obviously, you you try to get into helping others and the elderly. So, how did that start? And I know obviously you mentioned now you're about 800 employees in 2 states, which is wonderful, fantastic, considering that you're, 6 years in basically. So, can you maybe guide us a bit through your first couple of years with Cardinal?
So assisted living buildings, almost all your costs are fixed. It's very expensive, whether you have one person living in the building or you have 80 people living in the building. So the name of the game with any business like that is, driving occupancy or driving revenue. And there's some tricks and secrets and some realities of how you do that. And my business partner Chuck, he specialized in this in a previous life. Our chief operating officer, who's been with us since the beginning, she specialized in kind of driving occupancy. I've got a little bit of a sales focus as well. So what we did is, we kind of branded ourselves as the group who can take buildings that have struggled with occupancy and increase them. So what happens in assisted living is that the owner of the real estate is often a different structure and different owner than the owner of the operations. So what we did in for our first two deals, we found two buildings that were for sale in the same town that really struggled with occupancy, and we thought we could fix it. And we went to a group of investors who invest in assisted living and showed them the deal and showed them why we think we could do better. And they bought the building, and we triple net leased the building from them, which resulted in us being able to get into the building with very little cash. And then we went to work and we took one of the buildings from 70% occupied to 95% occupied, and another building from 80% up above 90% occupied. And we executed on our business plan of driving occupancy. And once we were able to show on those two buildings that we could deliver returns, the bank, really was open with that group, and we went out and acquired five more properties in that market.
Do you have any plans to spread out? So, of course, it looks like it's Michigan focused and you have a niche of things that work. What does the future look like? More states or different style of, multi-dwelling units?
So we view a region as 1,000 beds. In Pennsylvania right now is 650 beds, and Michigan has we just did a couple acquisitions, but it has roughly 300 beds. What we want to do is build each of those regions out to 1,000. One area that many businesses that have done the same thing I've done have got crushed on and is they've grown too fast in too many areas. Our business is a hyper local area, and all of our rules and regulations governing our business is a state level. So each state is very different, and if you don't respect how different those areas are, I've seen many operators get crushed doing what we do. Each region has a different kind of flavor and kind of personality. There's different power players in different regions. Some areas, the doctors groups are more powerful for really everything you need to get done. Some areas it's the insurance companies. Sometimes it's big health networks. Some areas are price conscious. So understanding your region is a very challenging thing to do. So we want to just continue to focus on for 2022 on both the Michigan region and the Pennsylvania region without expanding to any other states.
Right on. Yeah, I've heard that in the real estate space before, especially when you get into like the multiple unit business, because I guess you're essentially leveraged, right? When you have, an options contract of 100 shares versus like, 100 units, I guess a downturn in a market per unit compounds, right? And what do you think makes, besides regulation, that process so difficult? Or is it just that, you know, is it just strictly regulation? Maybe you can give an example, where people did get burned.
So when someone needs assisted living, a lot of our move-ins, and I believe the future growth of where move-ins come from is emergency placement. So someone has an event, they have a fall, or they have um, a dementia or Alzheimer's episode, and they end up in the hospital. And at the hospital, they determine that this person is no longer fit to live on their own. And it's up to the discharge planner of the hospital to refer where that person should live. So they're called discharge planners. They're incredibly powerful people in our line of work. If the hospitals and the discharge planners want to keep residents kind of in the continuum of care of that hospital system, and they're only referring people out to buildings and communities that have relationships with that hospital system is incredibly powerful in that market. And you need to know that. And that's probably one of the things I think we're going to start seeing more and more in our line of work is the hospital systems getting larger and larger and assisted living continually moving from a lifestyle choice to kind of a need-based medical decision. So understanding who the big hospital players and what their goals and direction that they're going in is going to be something that's very different on market to market on kind of who is ultimately in control of those things.
Because I'm not very familiar with your, line of work, and I do find it very intriguing because where I'm from, we have assisted living, but it's usually fully subsidized by the government, so we don't have a private practice for it. So, in this event, do hospitals or do people themselves who maybe would come to you guys as a place to take care of the elderly, why would they choose you over someone else? Is there, is the competition fierce, for lack of a better term, or is there something that different that you can provide to make sure they're taken care of the way their families want?
So there is a lot of competition in assisted living, especially over the last few years pre-pandemic. A lot of new assisted living buildings were built in under the hopes that there would be a large wave of baby boomers in the next decade that are going to need assisted living. So we compete very heavily against other assisted living operators. And when someone's looking for a place for their mom, the number one question they're trying to figure out is, are you going to love my mom the way I love my mom? Which is a very difficult thing to shop for. Uh, we do tours and you answer questions and there's lots of inquiries from families about what meals you have, what programming you have, what staff turnover you have, what ratios of caretakers to residents you operate in your building. But ultimately they're trying to figure out, are you going to love my mom? And that's not really a bricks and sticks type question. So even your nicest buildings, your newest buildings can put up the kind of facade that they're going to love and care for your resident. But it's similar to if you have children and with daycares or anyone watching, a loved one of yours. There's a lot of window dressing, but ultimately it comes down to, does that hourly worker who's making, anywhere from 12 to 20 bucks an hour, does that person love your loved one in the moments where they have the highest need? So understanding what business we're in, which is selling love and care, and how to communicate that is the challenge for our marketing department, and it's the challenge for us as a company to kind of get out there and tell our story of why your loved one would be successful in our care. And we specialize in buildings that are older. They don't have all the amenities the newer buildings do. It's a little bit more of a challenge to kind of tell that story.
That's really powerful, and it really does capture what's important to people. And I think what you're doing is more important than money, because when it comes to close family, I think there really is no replacement, right? So if you have a bad business investment dollar wise, I think the most seasoned can understand that there are more opportunities. But you know I think with family, it just uniquely it's a unique connection, and it matters so much. So what do you think the space needs more if people want to get in the space in their local markets? Because of course people listen from all over. Um, where can they start to research how to get involved? And is it going to be volunteering or, you know, as you said, I guess regulation wise, they'll have to do some homework.
So the space desperately needs more people who own and both the real estate and the operations company, uh, people with a healthcare background, people who've actually done the work. The space does not need more Joe Polans owning and operating assisted living buildings. They need more caretakers and people who geriatricians and people who understand the needs of the elderly. When I go to conferences amongst other operators where you meet the leaders from each of the competitors' buildings, you'll see a lot of people with healthcare backgrounds, a lot of women who've been working from the very most entry level job in the communities all the way up to executive directors, lifers in industry. And you'll see a lot of them. And then when I go to conferences to talk with people who own, lend, and are the true final decision makers in assisted living, it's really all accountants and people with finance degrees and no one with uh, really any care background. And I think a lot of the decisions you see being made that are resulting in negative long-term outcomes for residents and the elderly in our country could be a little bit better if we can encourage more people from a healthcare background to learn the business side, which I think is the easier thing to learn than for people from the business side to really learn the love and care part.
That's something that, been working in the automotive industry for many years. It's the same with some automotive companies. I'm just using this as an example since that's, what I'm familiar with, is when business people get involved in something perhaps that not necessarily, even though it is a business and you have these big corporations that are trying to build cars and sell them, it does matter that you want engineers, you want car people basically to go through the ranks and maybe eventually you run the management team. Because what happens, and that's what happened even with some of the bigger American companies like GM and Ford and Chrysler during the crash of '08, '09, was you can see their vehicles perhaps sometimes compared to the global competition maybe slightly decline. And this is coming from a guy who loves American cars, right? So, but in terms of a bit of the inside quality, the fit and finish, and there was claim that there's a lot of accountants and people with finance backgrounds really running the company as opposed to people who really notice and know the ins and outs and work the small details of the ergonomics of the vehicle, of the interior, of how the suspension work and engine, and try to maximize that as opposed to being counting just the figures on how to maximize their profit, minimize their cost. So, like you mentioned, it's when people come with the experience, with their healthcare experience, starting from the very beginning, that perhaps I would think it just resonates with what I know as well in terms of trying to grow and trying to really provide what people are looking for in these assisted living industry, if you like. So yeah, it's a very good point that you bring up. And is there a change? Is there any changes that you would make now, or you plan on making in the near future, perhaps to differentiate yourself from the rest? You mentioned that the business is booming, which is fantastic, and for your side. Now, how is that applied with maybe is it extra pressure based on the number of rooms and beds you have available?
So I didn't know this term when we first started doing it, the term of kind of decentralized leadership. But my business partner Chuck doesn't have a care background. I don't have a care background. We never claim to or pretend we have a care background. We hire people to run buildings that have a care background, and the speech we tell them is, look, we're marketing guys, we're entrepreneurs, we're kind of team builders. We're not care providers, and you'll never once hear from us how you should care for one of your residents. We inherently trust you and believe that you know what's right and you know how to care for your loved one. It's my job to kind of coach you up on the business decisions, and we're going to try to educate you on all the key performance indicators that we have in our business and try to make it as simple as possible and put all the information in our executive director's hand. And it's up to that individual to make the decision on a per building level. Each building kind of completely operates independent of all the other buildings, and as many decisions that can be made in the building need to be made in the building. This kind of empowerment, kind of teamwork first, is really teaching the executive directors how to run their buildings. And I'd hope, one day I'm able to invest in some of the buildings that these individuals might one day buy if they decide to leave Cardinal, and that hopefully will be the legacy of Cardinal, is that we were able to train and give opportunities to care providers to really get in on to the business side where the real money's at, and they can make kind of generational wealth type opportunities for them and their family, and also come from that care background, which I believe will ultimately result in better outcomes for elderly people in this country.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second. I think it's a very insightful point because, at the end of the day, even just people growing up, you're told to get a job, you're told to, find something with a pension or, I think the cliche is loyalty is rewarded and, it is so much, I guess, dependent on the economics of how a country's doing and things could be good, but nothing stays the same forever. So I think, modern day expenses have gone up, cost of food, rent, living, buying a home has really, really gone crazy. So I often think about that now. Like, whose job is it to make sure people succeed? And what's the narrative? And that's why I think, like, unique takes on how to grow wealth are interesting because the conventional wisdom doesn't necessarily apply anymore and you almost have to get creative with a startup, or it could be all these new sources of information that maybe do work. And I think that's kind of the beauty of Twitter, which is people share ideas, information, knowledge. And I think you're on a great path, which is very altruistic. It's a very it's not zero sum, so it's enough for everyone. And I think the world needs more of that. So that's awesome. And do you kind of agree with that idea that, I don't know, I always thought government is good for, like, the basics, so food, shelter, clothing, and it's tough for them to efficiently teach everyone how to do well, and maybe not everyone wants to, but I think opportunity to kind of open someone's eyes and say, you know what, you could actually do something with your life. And I think, a lot of people kind of, it's tough because not that, people are uneducated or bad or don't want it. It's just sometimes they don't believe. So you're almost bringing belief, you're almost showing the way for people to build up a fortune and, wealth.
I guess I have a little bit of a kind of different opinion than a lot of people on Twitter. I don't really have a negative kind of view on government. I view government as, it's all of us, and humans are inherently pack animals that all of us would do very, very, very poorly out in the wilderness by ourselves. And even if you could find a way to survive, it's really not a pleasant uh, way to live your life. And we are an interconnected species. We need each other. And I believe, you know, there's certainly negatives as it relates to government, but government is kind of this struggle all of us have to kind of figure out how we're all going to work together. And I kind of believe at my core that I have a responsibility to my neighbors. I have a responsibility to those I work with and those in my community I interact with. I have a responsibility to the elderly, people who've really created the society that has benefited me so much and benefited my child and my wife, and I owe a debt of gratitude to them. And I think that that resonates a lot with the people who work at Cardinal, who kind of feel like they've been put on this planet to care for the elderly. They believe themselves as healers and caretakers, and you can see the light in someone's eyes who, truly loves caring for another. Uh, but now that Cardinal is the size that it is, people who are care providers and give so much, oftentimes they don't take care of themselves. They give and they give and they give and they give until their cup is empty. So my role now is kind of moved from caring for the elderly to really caring for the direct reports that I have and watching out for them and trying to find any area that I can within reason provide value to them and help them, and understanding kind of the wealth piece and trying to do whatever I can to put bonus programs in place and put cash in their pockets and give them a line of work that doesn't suck every last minute out of them. The dirty little secret in assisted living is, because our employees love the residents so much, you can really treat them pretty terribly, and you can see it on kind of Glassdoor. Some of the largest operators of assisted living in the country have, or one of the worst places to work at. And that's because, if someone's willing to put up with substandard conditions, substandard pay, all for the love of their residents, they'll do it in our line of work where they won't put up with that in some other lines of work. So I guess that's a roundabout way of just saying that, I think all of us are responsible to each other, and we all have to find a way to provide value. There's a quote that I think about a lot, and I'm probably going to butcher it, but the gist of it is, it's from Albert Einstein, and this idea of, the goal is not to be a successful person. The goal is to be a useful person, and that's the highest compliment you can pay someone, is that they're useful. And I think about that a lot from my perspective, that if I'm seen as someone who provides value and is useful to those around, that's kind of achieving the goal of what I kind of want my life to be about.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot on the show is, what can you do to change others' lives, other people's lives? And we do love entrepreneurship on the show as well. And sometimes it's just pursuing a need that people are looking for or something that is not being provided. And there's a lot of request or attention towards that in terms of trying to find a service or a product that can provide that or fill that need. And that's the thing is once you become useful to someone, there is value to that. Obviously, for many people in entrepreneurship, they usually pursue things that they're passionate about. And like yourself, that's when you decided about 6 years ago doing what you're doing now. We never really discuss numbers, and I think that's beside the point because what it is you're 6 years strong, you're 800 employees in, you have people that you're taking care of and providing better lives for, and trying your best to make sure the people who work with you are also having better life. And that seems to be overlooked in as the experience of let's not work for others, let's try to create our own thing, is because usually the employer doesn't always look out for their staff. I'm not saying that's the case with everywhere you go, obviously not, but with the attempt and the effort that you put in to try to improve the lives, like you said, some way or the other of your staff who are definitely, I would assume it's not going to be an easy job getting burnt out, making sure to attend to the needs of the people that are at the center and trying to give them a better experience. There's sometimes you just need someone who would watch you and as an employee and know that you're also taken care of. And I think that could be, or that is usually, I think is a definitely recipe for success, because if they're happy, that's just going to flow to the elderly that you're taking care of.
Yeah, definitely. You can only affect the people kind of closest to you, and try to set the tone, running a company and trying to keep it simple, and Our motto at Cardinal is do the right thing. And I've been in lots of assisted living buildings. I've run them. Buildings where people are happy, they're fulfilled, they're laughing, they're enjoying themselves. Like those buildings, like print money. Those are very, very, very profitable buildings. The buildings where people are stressed out, they're hating their life, they are fighting the doorknob to come into work. There's no joy. You can feel it when you're in the building. Those buildings are a disaster financially. They're the money in our line of work, it really follows quality operations. And that's kind of the funny part of it is a lot of times when I talk to other individuals who run buildings like ours, some of the larger companies, even in our own industry, there's a misconception that somehow financial performance and quality care are, it's an either or type situation. And it truly is not. And caring for your staff and doing the right thing, it kind of on a cosmic level is the right thing to do, but on a financial level, it's totally the right thing to do, and it drives returns, and there's more kind of there's a bigger pie to kind of share amongst everyone involved.
Yeah. I've heard something like that before, kind of in an unrelated space, but I know when it comes down to someone like a Costco, they're known for having, I think, the highest salaries and, happy employees and things like benefits and all that. So, it's an interesting experiment, and I wonder why a lot more businesses don't try it. And why do you think there's such a strong correlation there? I guess happier people feel more fulfilled and want to do more. And, it probably is a compounding effect, right? Where if people around you inspire you to do better, and then you're also, you're in tune, so to speak. So you're all on the same wavelength, and you all understand the mission, the common goal. But if you have like a top down approach where it's dysfunctional, and, the owner is mad at upper management, and then upper management is mad at their staff and rude, and, I think it just leads to, um, I've heard it explained as like a fight or flight type thing where, as an employee in any field, if you have negative vibes and you're worried or stressed about how you're performing, because you almost lose the whole message of why you're there. And then it becomes, even if you're the the funny thing I find about employees in an organization is that if you're targeted, or you or you're in someone's bad books, sometimes it's such a dark cloud. It has nothing to do with whether or not you're actually good, or otherwise neutral things could be misconstrued as, negative. And then it's just like a negative feedback loop that keeps going and going and going. And, it's dangerous because at the superficial level, people work for a paycheck. They need to live. So, it's almost like you're almost lucky to find a good place where everyone gets along, and, you have a purpose. So it's why we talk about, finding your purpose and exploring and discovering and trying. So what would you say to someone who isn't maybe 100% happy with where they are, or maybe even an operator who just doesn't seem to be connecting the dots? How do they break that mold and, you know, get everything working well?
So when I talk to other people, both in senior living and out of senior living, and friends of mine who kind of find themselves stuck, is I was fortunate enough, I'm kind of passionate about this, and I was able to find a line of work that kind of matches up with my passion. And I found more success looking at not what you do for a living, but who you do it with and who you do it for. So if you have found if you like the people you work with and you trust them and you believe in them and you enjoy being around them, it doesn't really matter what you are actually doing. And I find myself kind of leaning that direction as well. Like I really, really enjoy all the people at our upper management levels and the people who run our, the executive directors in our buildings. And I told my business partner Chuck, I was like, look, if this Cardinal thing doesn't work out, I still would want to work with you, digging ditches or doing whatever. And I would love to work with Lisa and Mike. And everyone else on, our team of misfits on our team. And I kind of think, does my fulfillment come from knowing that ultimately we're caring for the residents, or does fulfillment come from the fact that I love and care about the people that I get to go to work with every day? And I run into people who are kind of struggling or kind of at a crisis point, and I try to dig in to see kind of what their feelings are towards their coworkers and to their boss and to the people that they interact with on the closest level. And there's usually a disconnect there. And I think, if I was to advise someone who's kind of at a little bit of a crossroads in their life, I would say, what type of person do you enjoy, working with the most, and who's been kind of the most positive memories you have of people you've worked with in the past? And then I would prioritize trying to find situations where you work with people like that, and find your happiness and find your kind of purpose and kind of place in the world through that lens. Maybe that's helpful to someone. It's been helpful to me.
Yeah. No, it's a good message, and I think sometimes, you hear about the whole walkouts for wages and frontline workers, and that's why I like talking about different career paths and how to get there. And I think, yeah, the most successful people like yourself do have a purpose behind what they do, and it's not superficial of I've got a cool title, I've got, a better paying job than someone else. So I think it's such a journey, and being able to navigate that sometimes is difficult. So I mean, in the age of sending 100 resumes and maybe no one is responding, what about the people who don't get the chance to even decide, right? Because if you're applying to a bunch of jobs and not getting interviews, or you're getting interviews and maybe you feel it's not commensurate to your skill level, are you of the camp to, the cliches, get on the ground floor and work your way up? And I think, for myself, that's kind of the path I took. But do people want everything today, and do they not want to put in the work? What are your thoughts on that disconnect of people who think maybe the world's fixed and they want, and they don't maybe leave themselves open to discovering something that could be good for them?
Kind of inherently, people just, want to be part of a group, and they want to be part of a team, and they want to be part of an environment where their input's valuable. And I think, this kind of disillusion with work and disillusion with your kind of setting is kind of based on, in a lot of cases, kind of interpersonal decisions. I mean, I'd look at kind of the two of you hosting this podcast. For you, is it the benefit of kind of learning these nuggets from guests? Is it the connection of kind of getting to meet new people? Or, I would guess that just getting for the two of you to work together and have a reason to kind of continue to interact and work on a project together is, a huge point of why, this podcast has been successful and the two of you kind of enjoy doing it. And I think there's a lot of questions that you ask yourself and other people and trying to figure things out. But, it ultimately just comes down to the people in your life. And, I had a mentor early in my career that said, the most um, important thing is the quality of your personal relationships. That's what you should focus on. And he had a bunch of money and lost a bunch of money and got a bunch of money back and had financial success and career success and had all the ups and downs of a career. And if you read his Wikipedia page, you'd say like, wow, that guy's a really successful guy. But, just the relationships that he's made along the way is ultimately, really what matters. So I just, would kind of make that kind of my bumper sticker as it relates to working with others and finding your place.
Yeah, Cal and I used to work together, and the story is we kept in touch, and we always had talked about, even at that time, how to improve yourself. And, it was a common thread of way of thinking. And, we explored that. And a lot of it was, because he had flown back home, and it was keeping in touch through WhatsApp and email. And then, yeah, it just kind of manifested this way. And originally, it was just us talking. It was definitely a COVID project, and it came about where we, just talked about what we found interesting. And then, you know, eventually, I stumbled into, a guest or two, and it's really quickly evolved into super insightful and valuable. And the amount of people we meet, like yourself, and who have, such a unique background and are doing amazing things, I think is it's hard to measure that. And at the end of the day, I think it does come down to, a lot about mentorship, a lot about who you connect with in life. And in an hour, you may not keep in touch with every guest all the time forever, but I think there's something special about meeting someone who's on a great path and just stopping, having a coffee and talking to them, because people are so busy in their lives. And, it's not socially accepted to be like walking down the street and stopping with someone because they're on their way somewhere. So I think it's definitely a unique, way to open your eyes. And no, I love it. And at the beginning, it was very much about accountability for ourselves and, documenting our own thoughts and our own path for, what we find valuable and useful. But, it's so subjective. And I think being able to pause and listen to someone who has an interesting perspective is important, because the world's a big place. By chance been to Michigan, but there's so many places I've never been to. And like the world is so unique that way. And so many people have different shared experiences that a lot of people say like traveling humbles you if you see how people live. And, it helps you get outside of your own sphere of how you think and help to understand that you're not the center of the universe.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I may echo all that. I agree, wholeheartedly with what you said.
Awesome. So, Joe, it's been an awesome hour. What do you have as we wrap up here? What do you have on the agenda in the next, as you said, we're into 2022. What's the game plan for you?
So we are under construction on two sites to build assisted living buildings. I'm actually submitting an offer tomorrow on another larger community in one of our markets. So it'll be a year of growth, both through acquisition and through development. And as we continue towards that goal of getting to 1,000 beds in Michigan and 1,000 beds in Pennsylvania. So an exciting year. Should continue to add to the team, kind of bring more people on, and hope that we can keep chopping wood and what we've been doing and providing great care, and that we'll look back on 2022 as a year of growth and expansion where we learned a little, and yeah, we're able to build on what we've done.
Awesome. Continued success. Definitely keep in touch. We'd love to hear how that's going, and we'd love to have you back on the show sometime.
Thanks.
Thanks. Same to you. So, with that said, let's wrap up today's episode. Thank you for listening to another episode of Methodical Millions, where you can better your future and better yourself.
Thanks, everyone.